My name is Harper Collins, and I was 34 years old when my son taught me how quickly love can disappear, sometimes even before the body is cold. For 3 years, my life had revolved around calendars, needles, whispered prayers, and a hope I didn't let myself say out loud anymore. Fertility treatments stripped time down into 2-week cycles. Hope, then disappointment. Hope, then silence. 2 miscarriages taught me how to mourn quietly, how to smile through dinner while my chest felt hollow. By the time I finally stayed pregnant, I was afraid to believe in anything. But belief crept in anyway. It came in the form of a tiny heartbeat on a flickering screen. In the way my hands instinctively moved to my stomach when I laughed. In the nursery, I tried not to decorate too early, just in case the universe was listening and decided to punish my optimism. My boyfriend David was gentler than I expected grief to allow. He didn't rush me. He didn't promise everything would be okay. He just stayed. He built the crib himself, tightening each screw like it was a vow. We argued sometimes, quietly, about names, about paint colors, about whether we should even let ourselves imagine a future. But underneath it all was something solid. When Oliver was born at Mercy General Hospital, he felt unreal, like a miracle I wasn't allowed to keep. He had David's chin, my grandmother's eyes, and a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh, that made something in my chest finally unclench. For the first time in years, I slept without waking up afraid. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what surviving was for. The nursery didn't feel haunted anymore. It smelled like clean cotton and lavender detergent. At night, I would sit in the rocking chair and memorize every inch of him, convinced that if I loved him hard enough, nothing bad could touch us. Life didn't correct me right away. It waited. Oliver was 4 months old when he got sick. At first, it was nothing. A sniffle, a cough, the kind of thing every parent panics about the first time. The pediatrician smiled and told me I was doing great. First-time mom nerves. 2 days later, his fever climbed past 104. His breathing turned shallow, fast, wrong. By Thursday morning, I was running through the emergency room with him pressed to my chest, his body limp in a way no babies should ever be. David was there, his hand crushing mine, both of us moving on instinct because panic had stolen language from us. The next 6 days dissolved into noise and light and terminology I didn't understand. Machines beeped constantly. Doctors spoke carefully. Nurses avoided my eyes when they adjusted wires. I lived in that room. I sang to Oliver until my voice cracked. I read him stories about brave little boys who survived impossible things. I told him about the places I would take him, the bike I would teach him to ride, the way David planned to coach his first baseball team, even though neither of us liked sports. David went back and forth between work and the hospital, trying to keep our insurance active. I never left. Not when they moved Oliver to the pediatric ICU. Not when words like critical and prepare yourself entered the room. On the 6th morning, as sunlight brushed the hospital walls gold, Oliver's heart stopped. There was shouting. There were hands everywhere. Then there was silence so complete it felt physical. My son was gone. The pain didn't come all at once. At first, there was nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stared at the empty crib back home and wondered how breathing was supposed to work now that the reason for it had been removed. For 2 days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't feel anything except a dull, echoing absence. I thought my family would come. They'd been so excited online. Photos, comments, our sweet grandson, perfect little angel. My sister Danielle had shared Oliver's birth announcement before I'd even finished texting friends. I needed them. Danielle called once, just once. Her voice was awkward, rushed, like she was checking something off a list. She said she was sorry. She said she'd be there for me. My parents, Robert and Linda, had promised they would fly in from Denver the moment I needed them. Then the plans changed. I didn't know that yet. I was still sitting on the floor of Oliver's nursery, holding a blanket that still smelled like him, believing, stupidly, that blood meant something. I didn't know that the worst part of losing my son hadn't happened yet. That came later. And it came from the people who were supposed to love him too. The funeral director spoke softly, like volume alone could soften what he was asking me to do. Casket styles, linings, flowers. Words no parent should ever have to associate with someone who still fit in the crook of their arm. I nodded through everything, my brain floating several feet above my body. David sat beside me, his knee pressed into mine, grounding me whenever my vision started to blur. The casket was white, too small. I remember thinking it looked like a jewelry box, something precious, something that should never be buried. We chose Saturday. I called my parents that afternoon, or rather, I tried to. No answer. I left a voicemail. My voice sounded wrong to my own ears, thin, strained, like it belonged to someone else. I told them the time, the place. I told them their grandson was being laid to rest, and I needed them. Hours passed. Then my phone buzzed, not with a call, but with a notification. Danielle had posted a photo of her backyard in Scottsdale. Blue water shimmering in the pool. Gold balloons spelling congrats. A caption overflowing with emojis and forced gratitude. Last-minute pool party to celebrate big news, feeling so blessed. Family, friends, sunshine. What more could a girl ask for? My stomach dropped. I refreshed her page, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping the universe would blink and correct itself. Another post appeared, cocktail recipes. Another, her new house. Another, my parents in the background of a selfie, my mother's arms slung proudly around Danielle's shoulders. I called my mother again. This time, she answered. "Harper, honey," she said quickly before I could speak. "We were just about to call you. I could hear—" "You're in Arizona," I said. It wasn't a question. There was a pause. Not a long one, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. "We thought," she said carefully, "that it might be too painful to see you like this. And Danielle's party has been planned for weeks. We already bought plane tickets." My chest tightened. "Mom, Oliver's funeral is Saturday." "Yes," she replied, her voice strained with something that might have been guilt. "We know. We just thought maybe it would be better to give you space. We can visit next month when things have settled down." "Settled down," I repeated. My voice cracked on the second word. "My son is dead," she sighed. "Harper." My father's voice cut in. I realized then that I was on speakerphone. "You're being dramatic," he said. "You need time to grieve. This party is important for Danielle's career." The line went dead. I sat on the edge of Oliver's crib for a long time after that, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. The world felt tilted, unstable, like I'd stepped into a version of reality where cruelty was casual and love had conditions. Saturday morning arrived gray and wet, an anomaly in September. I wore black, not because anyone told me to, because it felt like the only honest color left. Sunrise Memorial Chapel smelled like lilies and disinfectant. 12 chairs were filled. 12. David's parents had driven down from Flagstaff. My best friend Casey sat behind me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. A few neighbors I barely knew, people who had no obligation to show up, but did. The front row was empty. As the pastor spoke about God's plan, about angels and peace, I stared at the small white casket and tried not to scream. My phone buzzed in my lap. A notification. Danielle had tagged me. I didn't want to look. I did anyway. She stood beside my parents, champagne flutes raised, sunlight catching the diamonds on her fingers. They were smiling, all of them. The caption read, "Family celebration. So grateful for the people who matter most." My hands were still dusty from the earth I'd thrown onto my son's grave when something inside me shifted. The grief didn't go away. It never would. But it stopped being soft. In the days that followed, I stopped reaching out. I didn't respond to messages. I didn't correct the narrative my family quietly constructed, that they'd wanted to give me space, that I was fragile, that everything had been misunderstood. David worried. I could see it in the way he watched me, like he was afraid I might disappear next. "I'm still here," I told him one night when he finally asked. "I just need to figure out who I am now." I went back to work earlier than expected. My job at the Phoenix Community Foundation welcomed me with sympathy and lowered expectations. People whispered about my strength, about resilience. They didn't know what I was doing with my lunch breaks. I researched. I made calls. I met with people who understood grief not as a phase, but as a permanent state that needed structure to survive. That's how Oliver's Haven began. A support group at first. A borrowed room at a church. Coffee, tissues, silence. Parents who had buried children too young and didn't know how to speak about it without the world flinching. The response was immediate, overwhelming. Stories spread, donations followed, volunteers appeared. And while my family continued posting about promotions and vacations and real happiness, I was quietly building something they would never understand. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone except my lawyer and David, was that grief wasn't the only inheritance I carried. My great-aunt Dorothy had died 2 years earlier. No children, no spouse. She'd left me everything. A trust, her home in Sedona, investments worth more than $2 million. I hadn't touched a cent. Not until I saw Danielle's latest post. Another resort, another caption about family being everything. That was the moment I stopped being quiet. I hired Bennett & Associates, the most expensive private investigation firm in Phoenix. I didn't ask them to dig up secrets. I asked them to find opportunity. Specifically, the Grandview Resort, the place my family loved, the place they celebrated everything that mattered. 6 weeks later, the call came. "The owners are retiring," Bennett told me. "They're open to a discreet sale." I made an offer that afternoon. 3 months later, the Grandview belonged to me through a shell company. Quiet, invisible, and right on schedule, Danielle sent out invitations for her biggest celebration yet. She didn't send one to me. She didn't have to. I already had everything I needed. Danielle's engagement announcement arrived the way everything in her life did. Loud, polished, and designed to be admired. A professionally shot photo appeared across every platform she owned. She and her fiancé, Trevor, stood barefoot on a white sand beach, her ring angled just right toward the camera. My parents were tagged within minutes, both of them glowing in the comments like proud sponsors. "Couldn't be happier. Our girl deserves the world. Family is everything." I stared at the screen longer than I should have, waiting for something inside me to crack. It didn't. Instead, there was calm, the kind that comes after a decision has already been made. David noticed the change before anyone else. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I slept through the night again. I stopped asking questions that had no answers. "You're different," he said one evening as we sat on the couch, the TV muted, the room dim except for the lamp beside us. "I'm focused," I corrected gently. Oliver's Haven was no longer a small support group borrowed from church basements. Within 6 months, we had 3 licensed grief counselors, partnerships with 4 hospitals, and a waiting list of parents who needed help yesterday. Donations came from strangers, from nurses, from parents who had survived the thing no one should. The local ABC affiliate ran a story. Then Phoenix Magazine reached out. They wanted to feature me in their Women Making a Difference section. My family didn't comment. They didn't share. They didn't call. It was like Oliver had never existed. And that was when I realized something vital. They weren't cruel because they didn't understand my grief. They were cruel because acknowledging it would require them to admit what they'd chosen instead. I documented everything. Screenshots of poolside celebrations, captions about people who matter, Christmas photos I wasn't invited to, birthdays, vacations, smiling faces posted while I learned how to breathe around loss. I didn't do it out of bitterness. I did it out of clarity. Bennett & Associates kept me updated throughout the purchase of the Grandview Resort. The deal was clean, quiet, exactly how I wanted it. The previous owners insisted on discretion. They wanted the property to maintain its exclusivity. I promised it would. I didn't tell anyone I owned it. Not David, not the foundation board, not even the general manager, Stella Hernandez, who believed she was reporting to an investment group called Sedona Holdings, LLC. I visited the resort twice under a different name, walked the grounds, memorized the layout, noted the acoustics of the main lawn at sunset, the capacity of the parking area, the flow of foot traffic. It wasn't revenge that guided me. It was logistics. Then the invitation went out. Danielle, in all her subtle cruelty, sent a mass email to the extended family. Join us for a luxury engagement weekend at the gorgeous Grandview Resort. Pool parties, spa treatments, and celebrating real happiness with the people who matter. No drama, please. This is about joy. Everyone received it. Everyone except me. I didn't need an invitation. I owned the place. Stella called the next morning. "Miss Collins," she said politely, "we have a large private booking request. Full resort buyout, first weekend in May. It's significant." I pulled the reservation up on my screen. Danielle Sterling. Engagement celebration. 12 rooms. Premium everything. Approve the initial booking, I told Stella, but don't send final confirmation without checking with me. She hesitated. May I ask why? I'd like to personally review the guest list. 2 weeks later, Danielle posted a video of herself on Instagram, pacing excitedly. "It's going to be perfect," she squealed. "Trevor's family is flying in from Seattle. Mom and Dad are handling the spa appointments. The Grandview is treating us like royalty." I watched it without blinking, because while Danielle planned cocktails, I planned something else. Oliver's Haven had scheduled a candlelight memorial for that same weekend months earlier. A gathering for families who had lost children. A space to remember names the world had moved on from too quickly. We needed room for 300 people. We needed privacy. We needed beauty. The Grandview was perfect. I called Stella again. "I need to make changes to the Sterling reservation," I said. Saturday morning arrived bright and warm, the kind of day Danielle believed she deserved. I woke in the owner's suite, quiet, elevated, unseen, and watched the resort transform below. Catering trucks, tables by the pool, white linens, champagne flutes lined like soldiers. At 10 o'clock, I met with security. Professional, discreet, clear. At 11, guests began arriving. Trevor's parents, Danielle's coworkers, old college friends. They were welcomed warmly, checked in smoothly. At 11:30, my parents' rental car pulled up. Robert and Linda stepped out laughing, dressed in resort white, Danielle bouncing between them like a star. I watched from behind a marble column as she approached the desk. "Hi, we're the Sterling party," she chirped. "This is going to be an unforgettable weekend." The clerk smiled. "One moment, please." Stella appeared. "Miss Sterling," she said calmly, "I'm afraid there's been an issue with your reservation." Danielle's smile faltered. "What kind of issue?" "The property owner has decided to host a private event this weekend. Your booking has been canceled." Danielle's voice rose instantly. "That's impossible. I paid a deposit. We have a contract." "Your deposit will be fully refunded," Stella replied. "We apologize for the inconvenience." Danielle turned red. "Do you know who I am?" That was when I stepped forward. "They do," I said evenly, "but this decision is final." The silence was immediate. My mother gasped. My father stared like he'd seen a ghost. Danielle whispered my name like it tasted wrong in her mouth. "What are you doing here?" I walked closer, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to Oliver's funeral. "I'm here because I own this place now." No one spoke. "I bought the Grandview 3 months ago," I continued, "and tonight I'm hosting a memorial fundraiser for Oliver's Haven, my son's foundation." My parents' faces collapsed in real time. Security began escorting guests out, kindly, professionally. Apologies, refunds, travel expenses covered. Trevor's family looked confused but gracious. Danielle's friends scattered, but my parents didn't leave. Neither did Danielle. They stood beneath banners bearing my son's name, and for the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. For a long moment, no one moved. The lobby, usually a space designed for soft laughter and polite small talk, felt like a courtroom without a judge. Danielle stood frozen near the front desk, her hand clenched around her phone like she might throw it at someone. My parents looked smaller than I'd ever seen them, the confidence they carried so effortlessly at her side, evaporating under the weight of what they were finally being forced to face. "This is a joke," Danielle said at last. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "You're joking." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, the way it had stretched around me at Oliver's funeral, the way it had echoed in my house when everyone else went back to their lives. "I'm not," I said calmly. "This weekend isn't about you." My father took a step forward, his face flushing red. "Harper, this is outrageous. You can't just buy a resort and humiliate your sister." I met his eyes. "I didn't buy it to humiliate her. I bought it because I needed it." My mother's lips trembled. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us about the money, about any of this?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You didn't ask," I said, "and when I needed you, you were busy." Danielle let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "So this is revenge? You lose a baby and suddenly you think you're entitled to ruin my engagement?" The word lose landed wrong. "I didn't lose Oliver," I said quietly. "He died, and you skipped his funeral." That finally broke something. Danielle's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I said I was sorry." "You said it once," I replied, "on the phone. And then you posted pictures from a pool party while I buried my son." Around us, the staff moved efficiently, discreetly removing evidence of what Danielle had expected this weekend to be. White linens folded away, champagne chilled for an event that would never happen. The banners for Oliver's Haven were already being hung along the lawn outside, soft blue fabric catching in the breeze. My mother followed my gaze. "What is all this?" she whispered. "A memorial," I said, "for children who died too soon, and for parents who didn't get support from the people they thought would show up." Her eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. "You're welcome to stay," I added. "All of you are. Tonight's event is open to anyone who can handle being present." Danielle scoffed. "You expect us to just sit there and watch?" "I expect nothing," I said. "I've learned better than that." Security finished escorting the last of the guests out. The lobby felt cavernous now, stripped of the noise Danielle had carefully curated. Trevor stood awkwardly near the door, his face pale. "I didn't know," he said quietly, "about any of this." "I know," I replied, and meant it. "This isn't about you." He nodded once, then followed his parents out, the engagement ring on Danielle's hand suddenly looking heavier than before. When they were gone, the four of us remained, my parents, my sister, and me, standing in the space where celebration had been replaced by truth. "You can't do this," Danielle whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "You can't take everything from me." I looked at her, really looked at her. "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I'm just no longer giving." She sank into one of the lobby chairs, her face buried in her hands. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl she'd once been, the one who cried when things didn't go her way, who learned early that tears worked. But this wasn't childhood, and I wasn't her audience anymore. I turned away and walked outside, where the late afternoon sun painted the lawn gold. Volunteers were arranging candles in careful rows. Names would be read tonight, names that deserved to be heard. David found me near the edge of the grass. He'd arrived quietly, just like he always did when things mattered. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I am, for the first time in a long while." He took my hand, steady and warm. "Whatever happens next, I'm here." "I know." As evening approached, cars began to arrive again, but this time they carried a different kind of guest. Parents holding framed photos, couples walking hand in hand, eyes red but determined. Volunteers greeting them with gentle smiles, offering candles and programs. This was what the grand view was for. Not champagne. Not hashtags, but presence. I stood near the podium as the sky darkened, the mountains silhouetted against a violet horizon. The crowd grew, far larger than I'd expected. Nearly 300 people gathered, their candles flickering to life one by one. In the back, I saw my parents. They had stayed. They stood together, close, my mother clutching my father's arm as though afraid he might disappear. Danielle hovered several steps away, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red. She looked lost, smaller. For once, she wasn't the center of anything. I stepped up to the microphone as the final candle was lit. The lawn fell silent. 8 months ago, I began, my voice carrying in the open air. I lost my son, Oliver. He was 4 months old, and he was perfect. A ripple moved through the crowd. Recognition, shared understanding. What nearly destroyed me wasn't just losing him, I continued. It was learning how alone grief can be, how quickly the world moves on, how even the people you expect to hold you up sometimes don't. I spoke of hospital rooms and sleepless nights, of empty chairs and unanswered calls, of the parents in front of me who had lived this story in different ways but felt the same ache. As I spoke, I watched my parents' faces change. My mother cried openly now. My father stared at the ground, his shoulders shaking. This foundation exists because of all of you, I said, because you showed up, because you understand that love doesn't end when life does. The candles glowed brighter as the night deepened. When the speeches ended and the names were read, each one a small universe gone too soon, I stepped down, my legs trembling, but my heart steady. My mother approached me slowly, like she was afraid I might vanish if she moved too fast. "Harper," she whispered, "I don't know how to fix what we did." "You can't," I said gently, "but you can stop pretending it didn't happen." My father joined us, his voice raw. "We failed you. We failed Oliver." I looked at them, really looked at them, and felt something unexpected. Not rage, not triumph. Clarity. "I forgive you," I said, "but forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means moving forward, differently." They nodded, tears falling freely now. Behind them, Danielle watched in silence. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to celebrate, only something to learn. The crowd began to disperse slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to break the spell the candles had cast over the lawn. People hugged longer than usual. Strangers exchanged. Oliver's name echoed in my head with every flickering flame. I stepped away from the podium and stood at the edge of the lawn, watching volunteers carefully extinguish the candles one by one. Not hurried, not careless. Each flame was treated like it mattered, because it did. Behind me, I could sense my family approaching before I heard them. Danielle was the first to speak. "I didn't know," she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of the sharpness that usually defined it. I didn't understand how bad it was. I turned to face her. "You didn't try to," I replied. My voice wasn't angry. It didn't need to be. "You decided it was inconvenient." She flinched, the truth landing exactly where it needed to. "I was scared," she admitted. "Everyone always told me you were strong, that you didn't need help, that you'd handle it." "That was easier than showing up," I said. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. Not the performative kind, the quiet kind that comes when there's no audience left to impress. My parents stood a few steps behind her. My mother's shoulders were slumped, her confidence replaced with something like humility. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him, the weight of his choices finally visible on his face. "We don't deserve forgiveness," my mother said softly, "but we're asking for a chance to do better." I studied them for a long moment. The truth was, I didn't need them the way I once had. The sharp, desperate need for approval had burned out somewhere between the hospital room and the cemetery. What remained was choice. "I'm not rebuilding the old version of us," I said finally. "That family no longer exists." My father swallowed hard. "Then what are you offering?" "A new boundary," I said, "and honesty. If you want to be part of my life, it will be on different terms. Oliver's memory is not something I will ever compromise on. He is not a footnote. He is not something we avoid talking about because it's uncomfortable." My mother nodded vigorously. "We understand." Danielle wiped her face with the back of her hand. I want to understand too. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I wasn't comparing myself to her. I wasn't shrinking to make space for her shine. Then start by listening, I said. Not explaining, not defending, listening. She nodded again. That night, after the last guest left and the resort returned to its quiet hum, I sat alone on the balcony of the owner's suite. The mountains loomed dark against the starlit sky. Somewhere below, staff moved softly, restoring the grounds. David joined me, handing me a mug of tea without asking. He never asked anymore. He just knew. You did something extraordinary tonight, he said. I shook my head. I did something necessary, he smiled. That too. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt earned, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. Do you regret it? He asked gently. Any part of it? I thought about the months of planning, the money, the confrontation, the way Danielle's face had collapsed when she realized the world wasn't bending around her this time. No, I said. I regret that it had to come to this, but I don't regret choosing myself or choosing Oliver. He squeezed my hand. He would be proud. Tears finally came then, quiet, steady. Not the kind that drown you, the kind that cleanse. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. My parents didn't disappear again. They showed up, awkwardly at first. They attended Oliver's Haven meetings. They listened more than they spoke. My mother volunteered at one of the counseling centers, folding chairs and handing out water like it mattered, because it did. My father stopped correcting the narrative. When people asked about Oliver, he said his name. Danielle kept her distance for a while. Then one afternoon, she asked if she could sit in on a support session. Not to speak, just to hear. She cried the entire time. Oliver's Haven grew beyond anything I'd imagined. New locations, new partnerships, a scholarship fund for siblings of children who'd passed. His name was spoken often, reverently, lovingly. And the Grandview Resort? It became our home base. Not for luxury parties, but for remembrance, for healing, for events that mattered. One evening, months later, I stood on the same lawn where the candles had once flickered and watched a new group of parents arrive. Nervous, hopeful, broken in ways only they understood. I walked toward them, offering a gentle smile. "You're not alone," I said. "You don't have to do this by yourselves." As they followed me inside, I felt Oliver's presence, not as pain, but as purpose. Family, I learned, isn't about proximity or obligation. It isn't about showing up when it's convenient or celebrating only the joyful moments. Family is who stands with you when the world collapses. Family is who stays when there's nothing left to gain. Family is who says a name out loud, even when it hurts. My son's life was short, but his legacy was powerful. And through him, I finally learned what love, real love, actually looks like.